What causes you the most hope? It may be hope in graduation, if you're a student, hope in a job, hope in a promotion, hope in a good life, a good marriage, grandchildren, whatever it is that you most hope in life. There is something in John 11 that we all long for, and that is resurrection and life. There is a lot of hope in this chapter. John 11, if you'll join me in John 11, we'll see that fifth statement of Jesus' fifth statement of his glory is the statement of I am the resurrection and the life. Jesus' glory is like the glory of, let's say, a diamond. A diamond has many facets, and all of those facets of the diamond are cut so that the light reflects through the top and back up, so it looks it sparkles. And the glory of that diamond is dependent on how well the diamond is cut and how clear it is. And so all of the facets of the diamond add to its glory. All of the attributes of God add to his glory. And it is extremely bright here in John 11 when Jesus has a friend, very close friend, Mary, Martha, their sisters, and their brother named Lazarus. Lazarus is sick and he is concerned. Jesus is concerned about his friend's sickness, but he doesn't go right away when told that his friend Lazarus is sick. We need to see that Jesus has love and Jesus has sovereignty. Sovereignty is one of those words that is all encompassing. If there was ever anything that happened in the world outside of God's control, he would not be sovereign. There are many world leaders that have tried to take the title of sovereign, but there's a lot in their kingdom that they didn't control. Some of them were even assassinated. So they obviously weren't sovereign in the true sense of the word, but Jesus is sovereign over all of the earth. And we'll see that that's part of his glory. Can you see, though, his glory at the death of his friend? We need to see his love, his sovereignty. We also need to trust. We need to see God's glory, and then we need to trust his safety. He's going to a difficult, dangerous area. His life has been threatened. You remember a couple times in the book of John so far that he has been tempted to be stoned to death, or they've tried to find him to arrest him. And they're going into an area where Lazarus, his friend, lives that is not safe for Jesus and his disciples to go. But we have to trust in our God's safety and what our God knows to be true. He says that Lazarus is just sleeping, although to God, death is just sleeping. To us, death seems final, it seems hopeless, because we've never seen anyone come back from the dead. But the resurrection, and all of us are going to be resurrected one day, should cause us to fear and should cause us to think carefully about Jesus' claims as being the resurrection and the life. We also need to come to Jesus for answers. As Jesus came to his friends, Martha and Mary, their brother just recently passed away 4 days before Jesus got there. And they said to him, Jesus, if you had been here, our brother would not have died. They knew he could heal Lazarus from his sickness, but what Jesus wanted them to see was his ability to raise the dead back to life. There are three people that were raised back to life again, and Lazarus is one of those. And it's probably the most common story of Jesus' miracles. The believers need to realize, we need to realize that Jesus is the I am. This is the fifth of the I am statements. He's already said that and remember, I am is God in the Old Testament. So he is the bread of life, he is the light of the world, and those are references to John 6:35 and John 8:12 and John 10:7 and 9. He says twice, I am the door. And then John 10, last chapter, also says, I am the good shepherd. So this is the fifth time he uses the word I am and then gives what he is able to do as God and who he is. And so, as the resurrection and the life, he is the one who is responsible for raising the dead and giving life. This is a remarkable statement, and none of us can make this claim. No doctor, no matter how powerful, no scientist, no matter how many chemicals and how smart they are, can reproduce this in a laboratory. Only God can raise the dead to life. God's sovereignty in our lives sometimes lead us into potentially dangerous circumstances so that our trust in him will grow. There are people all around us right now that are fearing death because of COVID-19. You may also fear heart disease or cancer or other things other diseases, weaknesses that run in your family, or a doctor has told you that you have been diagnosed with a certain illness that may be terminal. And God allows those things in our lives so that our trust in him will grow. Do not blame God for these things, and do not turn your back on the only one who can give you hope. And God's sovereignty in our lives leads us to trust him, and our trust needs to grow. You need to see Jesus. And when we see Jesus, we need to confess Jesus' glory. Martha, Lazarus' sister, tells Jesus Jesus says in verse 25, says to her, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet he shall live. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? And Martha says, yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who is coming into the world. And Jesus is expecting her to confess Jesus' glory. And Jesus expects all of us to confess his glory. If we will confess with our mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in our heart that God raised him from the dead, we will be saved. That's Romans 10. So we need to confess Jesus' glory. God expects us to come to him so that your trust in him will grow. God expects you to come to him so that you will trust him. As you see his glory, you'll trust in his power and trust in his goodness. Believers in Jesus need to grow in their trust. And Martha believed, and she needed to grow in her trust of his glory, not depending on other people. Other people were weeping. They were bringing spices to put on the body, and they did not coming to help her mourn. And they were not expecting the grave to be open that day. God expects you not to imitate others with small faith. And you can compare verses 22 and 32. Other people around Martha had small faith, and she is trying, despite her grief, to exercise faith in Jesus Christ, who claims to be the resurrection and the life. We needed to see this. God put this chapter in the Bible so that we would see his power and see his glory. We'll never be the same if we see God's glory. We need to see Jesus' anger over sin. Jesus wept is the shortest verse in the Bible, but he is weeping, probably not because he is sad that Lazarus is dead, although some say that that's the reason he's weeping. He's weeping because others don't realize how powerful he is and that he can raise the dead. Also, death is the result of sin. And because we're sinners, we deserve to die. And Jesus is frustrated and angry over sin in a perfect way because his friend has died. We need to see also, you need to see that, realize that Jesus is the I am. Anyone can claim to be the resurrection and the life, but unless you can raise the dead, which no one can, you can't back up that claim. Jesus, though, can back up that claim by going to the tomb, having them roll away the stone that would have kept Lazarus there, and they say that he has been dead for 4 days, and Jewish people thought that the soul stayed with the body for 3 days, so after the fourth day, there was no chance that anyone could ever come back to life. And so God is, remember, supernatural, outside of nature. And he says that you will believe. I'm going to do this so that you may believe that, and he's praying that the Father sent me, and that all the world will know that the Father sent Jesus. And when he had said these things, verse 43, he cried out with a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. And the man who had died came out, his hands and his feet bound with linen strips. So Lazarus moves, and some believe he was many, many feet below the surface of the ground where they would store bodies of the dead. And when Lazarus is standing in the doorway, still having been bound, wrapped around, kind of like if you've seen a mummy, cannot move because he is bound, his hands and feet are bound. It says that in the text. So the miracle of Jesus is Lazarus coming back to life, but it also, his word brings Lazarus standing in the door of the tomb so everyone can see. And Lazarus didn't walk there. The words of Jesus brought him there. This is God's sovereignty over death. We need to realize that Jesus is the I am. You need to know that Jesus is sent by God. Jesus praised that. And we've seen that over and over again in the book of John. You also need to know that Jesus isn't just sent by God, he is God. He is the resurrection and the life. God expects you to trust in Christ as the Son of God. You need to respond to his glory. We cannot look at Jesus' glory and stay the same. However, there are a few people. There's a God-pleasing response to seeing God's glory, and that is humble faith in Christ. Look at verse 45. Many of the Jews, therefore, who had come with Mary and had seen what Jesus did, believed in him. Unfortunately, though, the majority of the text of verses 45 to 57 aren't about a God-pleasing response. It's about a self-pleasing response. We're not surprised now, as we have read through the book of John up to this point, that there are many, many people that do not accept Jesus, all of his claims. His claim to be God, they're picking up stones ready to stone him. His claim to be the bread of life, they're confused and they stop following him. All of his claims, they're confused by it, they're frustrated, and they're angry, and they want to kill him. So this are all self-pleasing responses to Jesus' claims, and this is all rooted in pride. When you see God's glory, Romans 1 says, that's Romans 1, 18 and 23, when you see God's glory, you can turn that glory and change it. It's clear here in this text that God is glorious, that he wants you to see his glory and the glory of Jesus Christ and trust Jesus Christ, that he is who he says he is, and you place all of your humble faith in Christ alone. If you won't do that, though, your proud folly will leave you confused and frustrated and joining a group of people that want to destroy Christ. So you need this, so you will trust. You need to see his glory so that you will trust. You need to see Christ's glory in his compassion and his love for individuals. He not only just loved crowds of people to feed them and to help them, he also had compassion and love for individual people like Lazarus, Martha, and Mary. You need to see his sovereignty over life and death. Every time Jesus comes up against something that is unbelievably difficult, if not impossible, like raising the dead, he is reversing the curse on this earth. Everything that Adam and Eve's sin brought onto this earth, Jesus has come and is reversing all of that and making life where there is death. You need to see his sovereignty over life and death. You need to see that he is God. You need to respond to Christ's glory. You need to respond with humble faith in Christ. And you need to realize that proud folly will only lead to exalting God's sovereignty. God will be glorified. You cannot kill Jesus again. When he comes back again, I've seen people hold signs saying, if Jesus comes back again, we're going to kill him again. Well, you're not going to touch Jesus again. He is sovereign. He came first to die. The second time he's going to come to reign. God is sovereign over life and death. And if you reject Jesus, he is sovereign over your own destruction. So you need to destroy your pride. And seeing God's glory will help destroy that pride, which is keeping you from trusting Christ alone. You need to realize that John 11 is just a preview of the final worldwide resurrection. You can read about those resurrections in in Revelation, last book of the Bible, chapter 20 and following, and you'll see that all of the dead, small and great, are standing before God. You're going to be there one day, standing before God. And I hope that you will trust Jesus before death, because after death, it is too late. Think about John 11. If you have any questions, comment below.